In July 1875, blacksmith Jonas Hartwell collapsed and died in his forge at the precise moment a 12-year-old girl had whispered he would. The hammer fell from his lifeless fingers at exactly 3:17 in the afternoon, just as Lucinda Blackwood had predicted down to the minute 3 days prior. But Jonas was only the first. Before we begin this descent into one of America's most chilling, documented cases of supernatural terror, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we uncover in the weeks ahead. And please let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because after tonight's story, you might find yourself looking over your shoulder in whatever town you call home. The summer of 1875 found Asheville, North Carolina, still rebuilding from the war's devastation. 10 years had passed since the Confederate surrender, yet the scars remained etched in every weathered face and empty lot where homes once stood. The Blue Ridge Mountains cradled this small community of survivors like protective arms, their misty peaks offering refuge from a world that had changed beyond recognition. This was the New South, struggling to find its identity. Former Confederate soldiers worked alongside freed slaves in the sawmills that fed Asheville's Reconstruction. The sweet scent of pine lumber mixed with the acrid smoke from blacksmith forges as the town slowly hammered itself back into existence. Women gathered on porches for quilting circles, their needles stitching together more than fabric. They were mending the very soul of their community. The Asheville courthouse, rebuilt with local stone and stubborn determination, stood as a monument to order restored. Judge Marcus Whitfield would arrive there monthly from Charlotte, dispensing justice from behind his imposing oak bench. Dr. Samuel Henley maintained his practice in a modest 2-story building on Main Street, treating everything from broken bones to broken hearts with equal dedication. Pastor William Cross delivered sermons that balanced fire and brimstone with genuine hope for redemption. Children attended the one-room schoolhouse where Miss Catherine Moore taught reading, arithmetic, and the Bible with equal fervor. Market days brought the community together, farmers trading vegetables for nails, housewives bartering preserves for fabric. Saturday nights meant barn dances, where fiddle music chased away the ghosts of war, if only temporarily. This was ordinary life in Reconstruction-era Asheville, predictable, modest, and healing. The rhythms of daily existence followed patterns as old as the mountains themselves. Dawn brought rooster crows and chimney smoke. Noon brought dinner bells and children's laughter. Dusk brought lamplight and evening prayers. What they didn't know was that death had already chosen its messenger. Clara Blackwood arrived in Asheville during the winter of 1863, a war widow with calloused hands and a silent daughter. She rented a small room above Henderson's general store and established herself as the town's finest seamstress. Her stitches were small and perfect, her manner quiet but reliable. When brides needed wedding dresses or bereaved families required mourning clothes, they sought Clara's skilled needle. Lucinda had been 5 when they arrived, a pale wisp of a child who never cried, never laughed, and rarely spoke above a whisper. While other children played hopscotch and marbles, she sat in her mother's shop window sketching with charcoal stubs on scraps of brown paper. Her subjects were always people, but never their faces, only their hands, their posture, their shadows falling across doorways. Dr. Samuel Henley first examined Lucinda in 1869 when she complained of headaches. His medical journal, discovered decades later in his estate, contains detailed observations. Patient exhibits unusual pallor and premature maturity of demeanor. Pupils respond normally to light, yet there exists an unsettling quality to her gaze, as if she perceives beyond the visible spectrum. Mother reports no fever dreams, sleepwalking, or fits. Child appears physically healthy, yet spiritually displaced. Pastor Cross had attempted to include Lucinda in Sunday school, but the other children refused to sit near her. She makes us feel cold, 8-year-old Margaret Fisher complained to her mother, like winter lives inside her bones. The Blackwoods lived quietly on the margins of community life. Clara attended church but sat in the back pew. She shopped early morning markets when fewer people were about. She completed her seamstress work efficiently and without unnecessary conversation. Those who knew her described Clara as decent folk, trying to make an honest living, though all agreed something indefinable shadowed her daughter. Jonas Hartwell, the town blacksmith, was known for his booming laugh and generous spirit. At 42, he had survived Shiloh and Chickamauga, returning home to rebuild his forge with determination that inspired the entire community. His hammer rang out from dawn to dusk, shaping horseshoes and farm tools with the rhythm of renewal itself. Children gathered to watch him work, fascinated by the shower of sparks and the transformation of raw iron into useful implements. Jonas had been kind to the Blackwood women, never charging full price for repairs to Clara's sewing machine or the kitchen implements she brought for mending. War widows and their children deserve our protection, he'd tell anyone who questioned his generosity. What protection could he offer against what was coming? The first incident occurred during the spring of 1874, though its significance wouldn't become clear until much later. Lucinda approached Mrs. Sarah Garrett outside the general store, tugging gently at her Sunday dress. When the older woman bent down to listen, the child whispered something that made Mrs. Garrett stumble backward, her face draining of colour. "What did she say to you?" demanded Mrs. Garrett's sister Martha. "Nothing sensible," Sarah replied, but her hands trembled as she fumbled for her carriage door. "Just numbers. Nonsense about timing." Mrs. Sarah Garrett died in her sleep exactly 1 month later, at the hour Lucinda had specified. Dr. Henley noted the coincidence in passing, recording it as an unfortunate case of consumption that had progressed more rapidly than expected. Rural physicians encountered odd coincidences regularly. Children's superstitions sometimes appeared to align with medical realities through pure chance, but the whispers had already begun. Throughout that summer, Lucinda's behavior grew increasingly peculiar. She would appear at the most inappropriate moments, interrupting funeral services to stare intently at mourners, arriving uninvited at wedding celebrations to sketch the bride and groom with unsettling focus, lingering outside the schoolhouse while children recited their lessons. Miss Moore, the school teacher, complained to Clara about Lucinda's disruptive presence. She stands beneath the oak tree during arithmetic lessons, moving her lips silently. When I asked what she was calculating, she replied, "How many heartbeats they have remaining." I will not tolerate such morbid fantasies in my schoolyard. The child's drawings evolved from simple portraits to disturbing tableaux. Clara discovered sketches hidden beneath Lucinda's mattress, detailed illustrations of townspeople in their final moments, complete with dates and times written in her careful script. When confronted, Lucinda responded with her characteristic whisper, "I only draw what I see, Mama." Animals began avoiding the Blackwood residence entirely. Dogs would cross to the opposite side of Main Street rather than pass their door. Horses shied when Lucinda approached. Even the barn cats that roamed freely through every other building in town gave their home a wide berth. Pastor Cross attempted a pastoral visit in November 1874, hoping to provide spiritual guidance to what he assumed was a troubled child. His diary entry from that evening reads, "Visited the Blackwood home this afternoon. The girl sat perfectly still throughout our conversation, yet I felt as though she was studying me with the intensity of a coroner examining a corpse. When I rose to leave, she spoke for the first time. 'Pastor, your congregation will be smaller come Easter.' When I asked why, she simply replied, 'Because you'll be gone by then.' I departed feeling profoundly unsettled, though I cannot articulate why. Winter brought an unusual number of deaths to Asheville. Elderly residents succumbing to influenza, accidents claiming farmers during ice storms, a tragic house fire that took the entire Brennan family. Each death seemed within the normal range of rural hardship, yet those paying close attention noticed an uncomfortable pattern. Lucinda had been present, hovering at the periphery before each tragedy struck. The first recorded prediction came from Mrs. Adelaide McKinnon, documented in her sister's correspondence, dated March 15, 1875. Adelaide confided the most disturbing encounter yesterday at our quilting circle. Little Lucinda Blackwood approached during our afternoon gathering, waited politely for a pause in conversation, then whispered, "Tomorrow at sunset, ma'am." When Adelaide asked what she meant, the child simply repeated, "Tomorrow at sunset," and departed without another word. We laughed it off as childhood peculiarity, but Adelaide has been uncharacteristically quiet since. Mrs. McKinnon was found dead at her kitchen table the following evening, slumped over a half-finished letter to her son in Virginia. The local doctor attributed her death to heart failure, noting she appeared to have passed peacefully, just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The quilting circle disbanded indefinitely. Thomas Reed, who operated the town's busiest stable, received his prediction while shoeing a mare on a humid April morning. Lucinda materialized in his doorway like morning mist, speaking with her usual unsettling calm. 9 days, 2 hours from now, Mr. Reed. When he demanded an explanation, she elaborated with clinical precision. When the church bell strikes 3 on Tuesday next, your horse will throw you against the fence post behind Miller's barn. The impact will break your neck. Reed laughed nervously, but took the precaution of avoiding horses for the entire following week. On Tuesday morning, confident he had outwitted whatever morbid game the strange child was playing, he emerged from his house to find his favourite stallion had broken free from the stable. As he attempted to recapture the animal, it reared and struck him down at exactly 3 o'clock, just as the church bell tolled across the valley. Dr. Henley's examination revealed a precisely broken neck, consistent with the child's impossible prediction. The Patterson family tragedy unfolded with even more disturbing accuracy. During a church social in late April, Lucinda quietly informed young Mrs. Patterson that the baby's last Tuesday would be next week. Mrs. Patterson, clutching her healthy 6-month-old son, demanded the child explain such a terrible statement. Lucinda's response, recorded by multiple witnesses, was delivered with the emotional detachment of a weather report. The fever will take him 3 hours before dawn. He'll call for milk, but his throat will close before the cup reaches his lips. Baby Patterson died exactly as described, leaving his parents shattered and the community gripped by growing terror. Pastor Cross documented the escalating crisis in increasingly desperate diary entries. April 30th, 1875. Attendance at Sunday services has fallen by half. Those who remain clustered together, avoiding the Blackwood pew as if it harbours pestilence. I attempted to address the rumours during my sermon, preaching against superstition and fear, but even I find myself watching that pale child with mounting unease. May 7th, 1875, Mrs. Thompson approached me after services, weeping. She claims Lucinda whispered that Thompson's store would know fire before month's end. I counselled against entertaining such dark fantasies, yet I confessed to checking my own locked diary for any mention of prophecies concerning my person. May 15th, 1875. Thompson's general store burned to the foundation last night. No cause determined. Mrs. Thompson has taken her family to relatives in Tennessee. She left a note stating they would never return while that devil child draws breath in Christian air. Dr. Henley approached the situation with scientific methodology, though his medical journal reveals growing distress. June 3rd, 1875, examined subject again at mother's request. No fever, no signs of neurological disturbance, yet during consultation, patient calmly informed me that Mrs. Fletcher will join the others when the roses bloom fullest. Mrs. Fletcher is my most robust patient, a woman of 40 with no existing conditions. I cannot fathom what impulse drives such specific declarations. June 20th, 1875, Mrs. Fletcher collapsed during her garden work this morning, dead before I could reach her side. The roses in her yard had indeed reached peak bloom. I am beginning to question my understanding of medicine, and perhaps reality itself. The town's response fragmented along predictable lines. Older residents, particularly those who remembered Cherokee presence in these mountains, spoke quietly of ancient knowledge and spiritual sight. Younger families, educated in rationalist thinking, sought logical explanations while secretly checking locks and avoiding certain streets. Business owners found themselves torn between skepticism and the undeniable impact on their customer base. Market days became exercises in communal anxiety. Vendors watched nervously as Lucinda drifted between stalls with her mother, wondering if her presence foretold calamity for their enterprises. Children were forbidden from approaching her, yet she seemed to exert an almost magnetic pull on their curiosity. The stagecoach driver who connected Asheville to Charlotte began reporting passenger reluctance to disembark in town. Word was spreading beyond the mountains that Asheville harbored something unnatural, something that defied Christian understanding and scientific explanation. By midsummer 1875, 3 families had permanently relocated. The schoolhouse stood half empty. Sunday congregations dwindled to the most faithful, almost terrified residents. And still, Lucinda's predictions continued with relentless accuracy. Judge Marcus Whitfield arrived in Asheville on the morning train, July 23, 1875. A man of considerable reputation and legal experience, he had been summoned by concerned citizens who demanded official investigation into what they described as fraudulent prophecy causing mass hysteria and economic disruption. Whitfield was everything Asheville respected in authority. Educated at Harvard Law, veteran of distinguished legal career, and possessor of an unwavering faith in rational thought. He had prosecuted confidence men, exposed false mediums, and dismissed countless cases of alleged supernatural phenomena with methodical precision. His first official act was to interview Dr. Henley, whose medical records would form the foundation of any legal proceeding. The doctor's testimony, preserved in court stenographer notes, revealed a man struggling with conclusions that defied his training. Your Honour, I have practiced medicine for 15 years. I have witnessed epidemic, accident, and the natural progression of disease. Yet this child's predictions demonstrate accuracy that surpasses any medical prognosis I have ever attempted. She specifies not merely that death will occur, but precisely when and often how. No fever, no delirium, no evidence of mental disturbance, yet her knowledge proves consistently and possibly correct. Whitfield next summoned past a cross, hoping religious authority might provide explanations secular science could not. The pastor's testimony proved equally unsettling. The child possesses no biblical knowledge beyond what any Christian household would provide. She does not claim divine revelation or demonic influence. She simply knows. When pressed for the source of her knowledge, she responds only that the numbers show clearly. What numbers, Your Honour, I cannot fathom. The judge's investigation expanded to include interviews with surviving witnesses, examination of death certificates, and careful analysis of timing. Court records show Whitfield's growing frustration with evidence that supported every impossible claim made about the girl's abilities. Clara Blackwood's testimony provided the most disturbing insights into her daughter's condition. Speaking barely above a whisper, she described years of increasingly specific predictions. It began with small things, telling me when the milk would sour, when letters would arrive, when rain would start. I thought it merely childhood imagination until her predictions began, including darker subjects. She would mention neighbours dying before they showed any signs of illness. She would specify accidents weeks before they occurred. I tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but the timing. Always exact, always precise. When asked directly about her daughter's abilities, Clara's response chilled the courtroom. Lucinda doesn't predict death, Your Honour. She simply sees it approaching like others might see storm clouds gathering. To her, death dates are as visible and certain as sunrise. Whitfield interviewed Lucinda herself on July 28, 1875. The court stenographer's transcript captures an exchange that would haunt the judge for the remainder of his brief life. Judge Whitfield: Child, explain to this court the source of your alleged knowledge. Lucinda Blackwood: I see the ending of things, sir, like watching sand fall through an hourglass, but I can count every grain. Judge Whitfield. And you claim this ability allows you to predict when people will die. Lucinda Blackwood. I don't predict anything. I just see when their time runs out. Like reading a clock, only the clock shows life instead of hours. Judge Whitfield. If your claims are genuine, tell me when I will die. Lucinda Blackwood. After studying the judge for several moments, Your Honour will join the others before the next full moon when the courthouse bell strikes 7. The transcript notes that Lucinda delivered this prediction with no emotion whatsoever, as if commenting on the weather. Judge Whitfield, a man accustomed to intimidating witnesses and defendants, found himself disturbed by the child's absolute calm. Public reaction to the court proceedings polarized the remaining community. Some demanded Lucinda's immediate removal to an asylum, viewing her as a dangerous source of community disruption. Others, particularly older mountain families, quietly suggested that perhaps the child possessed Cherokee's spiritual sight, ancient knowledge that civilized society had forgotten but never truly lost. Business owners calculated the economic cost of continued association with supernatural phenomena. Property values dropped as potential buyers learned of Asheville's unusual reputation. The railroad considered reducing scheduled stops. Even the postal service reported delays as workers grew reluctant to deliver mail to addresses where Lucinda had made predictions. Judge Whitfield announced his intention to remain in Asheville through the next full moon, determined to debunk the child's claims through personal example. He arranged for round-the-clock medical supervision, armed protection, and witnesses to monitor his health and safety. If he survived past the predicted time, he reasoned, the entire supernatural edifice would collapse under the weight of failed prophecy. Dr. Henley agreed to provide medical monitoring, despite his private reservations. His journal entry from July 30th reveals profound internal conflict. I have examined this judge thoroughly. He exhibits no symptoms of heart disease, no signs of weakness or illness. Yet something in that child's certainty chills my very soul. Science demands I support the judge's rational challenge. Instinct warns me that we are tampering with forces beyond our comprehension. As August arrived, Asheville transformed into something resembling a medieval plague town. Families who had lived there for generations packed their belongings and departed for distant relatives. Those who remained did so from stubborn disbelief, morbid curiosity, or simple inability to leave. The courthouse became an unofficial centre of community anxiety. Judge Whitfield held court daily, processing normal legal matters, while armed deputies maintained constant vigilance around his person. Dr. Henley checked the judge's vital signs every few hours, recording normal heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing. Pastor Cross led special prayer meetings for the judge's protection. Yet despite these precautions, the judge's behaviour began exhibiting subtle changes. Court clerk Timothy Walsh noted, "His Honour appears increasingly agitated as the month progresses. He questions witnesses more aggressively, delivers judgments with unusual harshness, and frequently checks his pocket watch during proceedings. Yesterday, he interrupted a property dispute to demand the exact time from 3 different sources." Lucinda continued her daily routines with disturbing normalcy. She accompanied her mother to the remaining open businesses, sat quietly in the back of church services, and sketched with unwavering focus. Her subjects had evolved. The drawings now depicted specific locations around town, marked with dates and times that corresponded to her predictions. Mrs. Emily Crawford, one of the few remaining business owners, described an encounter that typified community interactions during this period. "I was arranging preserves on my shelf when that child appeared in my doorway. Didn't hear her footsteps, didn't hear the door open. She was just there, watching me work. After several minutes, she said, 'Mrs. Crawford, you'll close your shop before September arrives?' When I asked why, she tilted her head like a curious bird and replied, 'Because you'll be afraid to keep it open after what happens to the judge.' Then she turned and left, without another word. Dr. Henley's medical examinations of Judge Whitfield grew more frequent and detailed as August progressed. His notes reveal mounting concern disguised as professional thoroughness. August 10th, patient remains in excellent physical condition. Sleep patterns normal, appetite strong, no signs of fever or infection. Yet he reports strange dreams, featuring courthouse bells and mountain shadows. I have prescribed mild sedatives for anxiety. August 15th, Judge exhibits increasing preoccupation with time. He carries multiple timepieces, requests hourly confirmation of accurate timekeeping, and appears distressed by even minor scheduling delays. When questioned about these behaviours, he insists on maintaining absolute precision in all court proceedings. August 20th, patient's hands have developed slight tremor, though vital signs remain normal. He requested I examine him for heart irregularities, claiming he occasionally feels his pulse counting down like a military drummer. Physical examination reveals no cardiac abnormalities. The town's remaining children developed elaborate games designed to avoid contact with Lucinda while satisfying their morbid fascination. They would follow at a distance, counting her steps and timing her appearances, as if understanding her patterns might provide protection against her predictions. Margaret Fisher, now 9 years old, later recalled, "We used to dare each other to get close enough to hear her whisper, but nobody ever lasted long. She had this way of looking at you, like she could see inside your body, watching your heartbeat and your blood move." Billy Morrison claimed he saw her counting on her fingers while staring at him, moving her lips like she was doing arithmetic with his life. Cherokee families living in the mountain hollows began avoiding Asheville entirely. Medicine man Joseph Ridge, interviewed decades later, provided cultural context. "Our people have stories about children born with death's sight. They see the spirit well bleeding through into this one. Usually such children die young, the knowing burns them up from inside. But sometimes they live long enough to share what they see. We stay away from such places until the earth cleanses itself." August 25th, 1875 marked the full moon that would determine Judge Whitfield's fate and, by extension, the entire community's relationship with the impossible. The courthouse filled beyond capacity as residents, visitors, and curiosity seekers gathered to witness either the debunking of supernatural claims or the vindication of their deepest fears. Judge Whitfield had positioned himself strategically. Dr. Henley sat at his right hand, medical bag open and stethoscope ready. Deputy Sheriff Morgan flanked his left side, armed and alert. The court stenographer documented every moment, creating a minute-by-minute record of the proceedings. At precisely 6 o'clock, Whitfield called the session to order, announcing his intention to prove through personal example that superstition and fear have no place in a rational community governed by law and Christian faith. His voice carried the authority of education and experience, yet those present noted an underlying tension that betrayed his confident words. Lucinda sat in the front row beside her mother, hands folded in her lap, watching the judge with the same detached intensity she brought to all her observations. When Whitfield addressed her directly, demanding she retract her fraudulent prediction, she responded with characteristic calm. "I cannot change what I see, Your Honour. The clock shows what it shows." "What clock?" Whitfield demanded, his voice rising slightly. "The one that counts your heartbeats," she replied. "It will stop when the courthouse bell strikes 7. Dr. Henley immediately began monitoring the judge's pulse, finding it elevated but not dangerous. The crowd watched in fascination and growing dread as the minutes ticked toward the predicted hour. 6:30 arrived without incident. Whitfield appeared confident, even jovial, as he joked with spectators about the power of rational thought over primitive superstition. He ordered the deputy to check all courthouse clocks for accuracy, ensuring precise timekeeping for his eventual vindication. At 6:45, the judge requested water, claiming the courthouse felt unusually warm. Dr. Henley noted increased perspiration but normal vital signs. Whitfield's colour remained healthy, his breathing steady, his conversation coherent. 6:55 brought subtle changes. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his papers. His breathing quickened almost imperceptibly. When Dr. Henley suggested postponing the demonstration, Whitfield refused with characteristic stubbornness. "I will not allow a child's fantasy to disrupt legal proceedings or community confidence." At 6:58, Judge Whitfield stood to address the crowd, declaring his intention to remain at the bench until well past 7 o'clock. His voice carried clearly through the packed courthouse, confident and commanding. At 6:59, he paused mid-sentence, pressing his hand to his chest with a confused expression. The courthouse bell began tolling 7 o'clock. Judge Marcus Whitfield collapsed on the first chime, clutching his chest as his face contorted in sudden agony. Dr. Henley leaped to his assistance, finding a weak, irregular pulse and laboured breathing. The judge's eyes remained conscious, filled with terror and disbelief as he stared at Lucinda across the courthouse. On the 7th chime, Judge Whitfield's heart stopped beating. Dr. Henley's frantic resuscitation efforts proved futile. The judge was declared dead at 7:03, 3 minutes after Lucinda's predicted time, close enough to convince even the most skeptical observers that something far beyond coincidence had occurred. The courthouse erupted into chaos. Some spectators fled immediately, trampling each other in their panic to escape what they now considered cursed ground. Others surrounded the Blackwoods, demanding answers or hurling accusations. Clara wrapped her arms around her daughter protectively, while Lucinda remained eerily calm amid the surrounding hysteria. Deputy Morgan, overwhelmed by events beyond his training, made no attempt to restore order. Dr. Henley sat beside the judge's body, staring at his own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Pastor Cross stood at his pulpit, opening and closing his Bible repeatedly without speaking. In the chaos that followed, nobody noticed the Blackwoods slip away into the summer twilight. The exodus began immediately. By sunrise, August 26, over half of Asheville's remaining residents had loaded their possessions onto wagons and departed for anywhere else. Those who stayed did so in small, fearful clusters, avoiding the empty streets where Lucinda had walked and the buildings where she had delivered her predictions. Dr. Henley's final medical journal entries reveal a man consumed by questions that medicine could not answer. August 27th, performed autopsy on Judge Whitfield at family's request. Cause of death, massive cardiac arrest with no preceding symptoms or warning signs. His heart simply stopped. No disease, no abnormality, no logical explanation. A healthy man died because a child said he would at the exact moment she specified. August 30th, Mrs. Crawford closed her shop today, departing for family in Georgia. Before leaving, she confided that Lucinda had approached her yesterday with another prediction. "Mrs. Crawford, you were wise to listen." When asked what she meant, the child replied, "Some people hear warnings. Others wait for proof." Mrs. Crawford needed no further convincing. September 5th. I am among fewer than 30 souls remaining in what was once a thriving community. Have decided to pursue the Blackwoods into the mountains. Scientific inquiry demands understanding, even if that understanding proves fatal. The doctor's pursuit led him deep into Cherokee territory, following trails that wound through ancient forests toward the highest peaks. His final journal entry, discovered weeks later by a hunting party, was written in increasingly erratic handwriting. September 15th found their camp 3 days ago. Clara appears desperate, aged beyond her years, constantly watching the tree line as if expecting pursuit. Lucinda draws, obsessively, page after page of mountain landscapes marked with symbols I cannot interpret. When I approached to request interview, she looked up from her sketching and said, "Doctor, Henley, you should have stayed in town." When I asked why, she showed me her latest drawing, my own body lying beside this very campfire. The date written beneath matches today's date. I should leave. I should flee this place immediately, but I must know how she knows. I must understand. The journal ends there. Dr. Henley's body was discovered by Cherokee hunters 3 days later, dead of apparent heart failure with no signs of violence or struggle. His medical bag sat untouched beside him, along with Lucinda's drawing that depicted his death with unnerving accuracy. Pastor Cross abandoned his ministry in September, leaving behind a final sermon written but never delivered. I have prayed for guidance, for understanding, for divine intervention to explain what we have witnessed. The silence from heaven grows more deafening each day. How does a child possess knowledge that belongs only to God? How does she speak death like Scripture, fulfill prophecy with mathematical precision? I fear we have encountered something that exists beyond Christian doctrine, beyond human comprehension. May God forgive us for the questions we were too afraid to ask. The Asheville courthouse closed permanently in October 1875, officially due to insufficient population to maintain legal services. The building stood empty for decades, gradually falling into decay as a mountain weather and neglect claimed its walls. Local Cherokee avoided the structure entirely, referring to it as the place where death learned to speak English. Clara Blackwood's correspondence, discovered years later among her sister's effects in Virginia, provides the final documented glimpse into their mountain exile. October 1875, we have found shelter in an old cabin deep in the hollows. Lucinda grows stranger daily, speaking to empty air and drawing pictures of people I do not recognize. She claims they are future visitors who will seek her gifts. I fear what she has become, yet she remains my daughter. Yesterday she told me we would not survive the winter in these mountains. When I asked when we would die, she said, "Not we, Mama, only me, when the snow covers the highest peak." I pray she is wrong for once. Lucinda Blackwood's body was never found. Snow fell early that year, blanketing the Blue Ridge peaks in December 1875, just as the child had foretold. Cherokee hunting parties reported discovering Clara's frozen corpse in the abandoned cabin, but found no trace of her daughter despite extensive searching. The absence of Lucinda's body sparked decades of mountain folklore. Hunters claimed to hear whispered numbers carried on winter winds. Hikers reported encountering a pale girl who spoke of death dates before vanishing into the mist. Children in distant counties told stories of dreams featuring a dark-eyed girl who counted down their remaining heartbeats. Dr. Henley's collected medical journals eventually reached the attention of psychiatric researchers at the University of Virginia. Their analysis, published in 1889, concluded that the Asheville incidents represented mass hysteria amplified by post-war trauma and rural superstition. Yet the researchers could not explain the documented accuracy of Lucinda's predictions or the precise timing of each death. The Cherokee maintained different records. Medicine man Joseph Ridge's oral history, preserved by tribal historians, speaks of the pale daughter who learned to speak with death itself. According to Cherokee tradition, such individuals serve as bridges between the spirit world and the living, though the cost of this gift typically proves fatal. She was not Cherokee, Ridge explained to researchers in 1923, but the mountains taught her anyway. Some knowledge finds its own teachers, chooses its own students. The earth has been counting heartbeats since time began. Most people cannot hear the counting, but sometimes a child is born with ears for the particular music. Modern Asheville thrived again by the 1890s, rebuilt by newcomers unaware of its supernatural history. The story of Lucinda Blackwood faded into local legend, dismissed by rational residents as frontier superstition. Yet county death, records from surrounding areas continue to document unusual patterns, clusters of precisely timed fatalities that occur near mountain peaks during heavy snowfall. Forest Service rangers occasionally report finding charcoal drawings on rock faces throughout the Blue Ridge wilderness. The images depict human figures accompanied by dates and times rendered in a childish hand that seems to echo across decades. Rangers remove these drawings when discovered, though new ones appear, with disturbing regularity. Perhaps most unsettling are the modern accounts from hikers and campers who venture into the deepest mountain hollows. They describe encounters with a pale young girl who approaches their campfires, studies their faces with dark intensity, then whispers numbers before disappearing into the darkness. Those brave enough to ask what the numbers mean receive the same response every time. How many heartbeats you have left? Park officials dismiss these reports as imagination, amplified by wilderness isolation and local folklore, yet they acknowledge an unusual statistical anomaly. Hikers who report encounters with the mysterious child are statistically more likely to die in accidents within the time frame she specified. The mountains keep their secrets well, but occasionally those secrets speak to the living in whispered numbers and charcoal sketches. Lucinda Blackwood may have died with the first winter snow of 1875, as she predicted, or perhaps death simply taught her to wear a different face, to count heartbeats from a higher vantage point where time moves differently than it does in the valleys below. In the end, we are left with questions that rational minds cannot answer and evidence that scientific methods cannot explain. Did a 12-year-old girl possess supernatural knowledge of death's timing? Was she a conduit for forces beyond human understanding? Or did coincidence and mass hysteria create the illusion of impossible abilities? The answer may depend on whether you believe death keeps its own schedule, or whether sometimes a child is born who can read that schedule like others read clock faces. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep in your own comfortable homes, perhaps you'll find yourself listening more carefully to the rhythm of your heartbeat. Perhaps you'll wonder who else might be counting along, calculating the distance between this moment and your last. And if you hear whispered numbers in the darkness between sleeping and waking, remember that some knowledge comes with a price too terrible to pay. But probably it's just your imagination. Probably.